Just a month ago, Beijing revealed that it would halt all seafood imports from Japan. The announcement triggered immediate shockwaves. Countless Japanese seafood shipments headed for China were cancelled overnight. Analysts estimate that this suspension could cost Japan more than $500 million within a year. Naturally, Japanese fishermen are extremely anxious, but on the other side, Indian seafood exporters seem to be spotting an unexpected opening in the market. Some are even preparing to celebrate early. For years, India's seafood industry has struggled under extremely high U.S. tariffs, sometimes reaching as much as 50%. Now, with Japan suddenly pushed out of the Chinese seafood market, India hopes to jump in and capture the gap Japan left behind. The question is, will China be interested in buying seafood from India? India, home to 1.4 billion people, is often associated with spicy street food and crowded railways, but very few realize that the country is actually a major player in global seafood trade. With the ocean bordering it on three sides and more than 7,500 kilometers of coastline located in warm tropical waters, India is naturally blessed with fast-growing marine life and an incredibly diverse range of species. To the west lies the high-salinity Arabian Sea, ideal for commercial fish, while to the east, the nutrient-rich Bay of Bengal is famous for its abundant shrimp populations. With access to two very different marine ecosystems, India possesses natural conditions perfectly suited for large-scale seafood production. Its fishery zone covers roughly 34,000 square kilometers, and because the country sits near key Indian Ocean shipping routes, some of the busiest in the world, exporting seafood becomes faster and cheaper. This strategic position has helped India develop into a major seafood processing and export hub, sending products mainly to the Middle East, Europe, and the United States. Over the last decade, the Indian government has poured money into fishery development, aquaculture centers, cold storage networks, and processing facilities, while offering export-friendly policies such as tax breaks and subsidies. Together with its natural advantages, these efforts helped India build a strong presence in the global seafood market. Official statistics for 2024 show that India exported 1.7 million tons of seafood worth around $7.4 billion. The biggest buyers include the US, China, the EU, and Southeast Asian nations. The United States has consistently been India's top market, taking about 35% of its exports. Shrimp, especially white-leg shrimp, dominates the industry, accounting for nearly 70% of export earnings, and in 2024, the US alone purchased 47% of India's shrimp supply. These shipments travel from the Arabian Sea, across the Mediterranean and Atlantic, before reaching America's east coast after about 25 days. But now the US is no longer a reliable customer for India. What exactly changed? When Donald Trump took office, he began hitting Indian goods with major tariffs to strengthen America's bargaining position. On July 31st, an order was signed that placed a 25% tariff on most Indian products entering the US from August 7th. Then, on August 6th, Washington added another 25%, arguing that India's imports of Russian oil, directly or indirectly, required punitive action. With both measures combined, Indian exports suddenly faced tariffs as high as 50%, fully enforced by August 27th. These tariffs mainly targeted low-cost, labor-heavy industries such as clothing, footwear, furniture, and seafood, sectors that previously competed internationally because of cheap pricing. Once tariffs doubled their cost, Indian exporters lost their competitive edge, factories began shutting down, and seafood producers suffered an immediate and severe impact. Since the US accounts for 1/3 of India's seafood exports, the entire supply chain, from fishing boats to packaging units, felt the shock. Frozen shrimp, a staple item for large US retailers like Walmart, was hit the hardest. As soon as tariffs reached 50%, American importers canceled a huge number of orders. According to data released in October, India's seafood shipments to the US dropped by 9% year over year, leaving millions of workers in the industry facing uncertainty. To soften the blow, the Indian government approved a $5 billion emergency support package for export-oriented sectors including seafood and textiles. But this is only a temporary band-aid. It cannot sustain the industry long-term. India urgently needs a new market capable of absorbing its large export volumes, which is why attention is now shifted toward China. China, with a population of over 1.44 billion, is one of the world's biggest consumer markets and the second largest importer of seafood. Even though China has an advanced aquaculture industry of its own, local production still falls short of growing consumer demand. In 2024, China imported nearly $18 billion worth of seafood. For years, Japan dominated the high-end portion of this market, but now its absence has created a massive opening. For many years before the recent dispute, Japan steadily sold about $560 million worth of seafood to mainland China each year. Most of these exports were higher-end items like scallops, various shellfish, sea cucumbers, and similar delicacies. Chinese diners, especially those who enjoy Japanese cuisine, were used to seeing Japanese seafood as premium ingredients. Names like sea urchin, tuna, and scallops were almost automatically linked with Japanese quality. But everything changed abruptly in November 2025. After the Japanese Prime Minister made a series of comments that China considered unacceptable, Beijing responded by stopping all seafood imports from Japan. Only a few days later, nearly 4 tons of Japanese seafood that had just reached a Chinese port and were about to be sold were sent back immediately, and all Chinese buyers canceled their existing orders on the spot. A market that had long depended on Japanese supply suddenly found itself with a noticeable gap, something that hardly ever happens. Indian seafood exporters quickly sensed what looked like a rare opening. They believed that, for the first time in years, India might be able to compete directly with Japan in the Chinese market. If they could take advantage of this temporary absence, they might secure a long-term role in Asia's seafood supply chain. But their optimism did not last long. A closer look at what each country produces reveals the core problem. India simply does not offer the kind of products that Japan used to supply to China. Japan mainly sells high-value goods, premium scallops, bluefin tuna, sea cucumbers, and other items that end up in upscale Japanese restaurants and middle-class households. These foods highlight freshness and origin, and many of them are served raw as sashimi. India, on the other hand, does not have the farming conditions or processing systems required for seafood that will be eaten raw. Chinese consumers also pay close attention to the origin of high-end seafood. In fine dining especially, a country's hygiene reputation greatly affects how its seafood is perceived. India's main export is frozen shrimp, which is aimed at everyday consumers and sold in supermarkets and wet markets, relying on low prices and high volumes. It simply does not belong in the same category as Japan's premium seafood, and therefore cannot replace it. So the idea that India could fill Japan's position in China's luxury seafood segment is essentially impractical. India faces an even bigger challenge as well: competition from China's own producers. China is already the world leader in aquaculture, and when it comes to white-leg shrimp, the very product India heavily relies on, China's output is enormous. Huge shrimp farms operate across Hainan, Shandong, and almost every coastal province, and the entire industry is highly standardized and industrialized. China now produces over 1.6 million tons of white-leg shrimp annually, accounting for nearly 38% of global production. With such a strong domestic base, gaining market share becomes even harder for India. Quality control is another major obstacle. As far back as 2022, China suspended exports from 35 Indian seafood suppliers due to sanitation issues. India's seafood sector is dominated by small and mid-sized farms, about 70% of the industry, many of which lack the resources to maintain proper water treatment, hygiene, or disinfection standards. These weaknesses often lead to violations during processing. Add to that India's limited cold chain infrastructure, slow port handling, and transportation losses that can reach up to 35%, and the challenges multiply. Several countries have also reported Indian seafood containing excessive antibiotic levels or even banned chemicals. With this track record, convincing Chinese consumers of product safety is difficult, not to mention passing China's strict customs inspections. Meanwhile, China has already identified another source capable of supplying the types of products Japan used to provide: Spain. On November 27th, China's Customs Administration announced that Spanish-farmed aquatic products meeting relevant standards could begin entering the Chinese market immediately. Spain might seem like an unexpected choice, but within Europe it holds some of the biggest quotas for bluefin tuna. Spanish tuna is caught in the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean, two waters widely regarded as producing the world's finest tuna. In southern Spain, fishermen still use the ancient almadraba technique, producing bluefin tuna known for exceptional fat content, rich color, and a tender texture. Even Japanese sushi professionals consider Spanish bluefin the best in Europe. As a member of the EU, Spain also adheres to strict cold chain systems, standardized processing, and strong food safety oversight. China and Spain already have long-standing cooperation in agricultural trade, which gives Chinese consumers additional trust in Spanish seafood. Between January and October 2025, seafood imports from Spain arriving through Shenzhen port alone reached 100 million yuan, an increase of 47.3% compared to the previous year. And that is just one port. The newly approved list of Spanish products includes salmon, grouper, oysters, white-leg shrimp, and several other items that Chinese consumers buy frequently. It is clear that Spain's seafood exports to China will continue to rise, while India will find it even harder to enter the market. With all this in mind, how would you assess the future of India's seafood industry? And for more updates on upcoming topics and news, don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. We will continue bringing you informative and engaging content.